So what does it mean to be completely and absolutely open? Well, it's not something we can do, right? Because then we'll get into some form of management, but it is definitely something we can live. So we come to retreat from the four corners of the world, from our responsibilities, our relationships and lives as usual. And then we make our way here, put all of that on hold. Why do we come? What is our motivation? What brings us to retreat? Or even what brings us to the mat when we sit during the day? Well, I'd like to encourage you to not concern yourself with that. It doesn't matter what came before this moment. Perhaps it doesn't matter why you're here, what led you to come to this retreat. There was a talk once that Papaji gave, and he said, the past is a graveyard. It's rather like that. Sometimes in deep realization, we find that it's not just that the past is a graveyard. There's like no experiential source from which you're emerging. There's no experiential source from which anything's emerging. It just is. That's just full on right now. Didn't come from anywhere. Doesn't have an origin. Nothing is synthesized, created. It's just this right here, this appearance, which really takes you off the hook from so many things, from having to be the right person, from having to know the right practice. And then instead of being the director of your life, which in reality, you're neither the director nor is the life you think is yours anything like it. You imagine it. But being free of that, instead of being the director, the manager, you can be completely and absolutely open. So what does it mean to be completely and absolutely open? Well, it's not something we can do, right? Because then we'll get into some form of management. But it is definitely something we can live. It's definitely something we have access to. This unconditional openness. And we access it right now. The moment you acknowledge it, it's accessed. Now, our mind may be making some noise on the surface, making it seem like we're out of touch with that somehow. But again, the we that could be out of touch and whatever that state is that the mind's interpreting, those are the illusions. The openness is here, clearly. So why does retreat give us the most direct access to this? Well, part of it is what I already described, is we've really set everything aside, all the typical responsibilities, both at the heart level and the intention level, but also at the practical level. They're not here. Our job is not here right now, and our family members aren't here right now. So again, we can just release our attention from that, all that navigation and management and monitoring that goes on with all of it, and just free it all up. Not to use for more management. We don't need to manage retreat, but just free it up and just see what happens. Free it up as an experiment. And then openness will show you what it is. You don't have to try to acquire openness. It's the freeing up that allows the openness to just become a little bit clearer into your perception, let's say. It's like a frequency you tune into, so to speak. And you can bring a bit of curiosity to this. What is this openness in its depths? What is the openness in the sound? What is the openness in the taste of dinner? How is the openness coming through right now? How is the openness destroying all beliefs right now? How does that openness replace everything right now? And that sounds like some kind of earth-shattering shift or something, and it can be like that. But it's also is just so. This openness is just the case. So it's a paradox in that it can be kind of an explosion experientially. It can seem to burst on the scene of your experience. And also, it's already there the whole time. Infinitely patient, to personify it a bit. Imminently available. In some iterations, this openness becomes emotional experiences we hadn't touched, perhaps, for a long time. So when we start to set aside all these distractions and management strategies and all this baggage or whatever, all the mental stuff and the resistance to some degree, and we set that aside, a lot of times material comes up from what's closer to our root, the root of our life energy in this physical, temporal manifestation, so to speak. And a lot of times that has been pushed aside or suppressed through creation of identities, all kinds of identities. The identity of an older child, the identity of an adolescent, the identity of a young adult, the identity of an older adult. They're just kind of like layers that have a lot of function. They have functional value, mostly among other apparent identities. But they also function to suppress certain kinds of root experiences, root energies that will feel often like something like emotion. Could also just feel like energy. Could feel like even intense energy, Kundalini type energies, things like that. But that's part of the openness. That's the it's often the first stop when you sort of open the door and invite everything in. Some of the first material that comes in is what you've been chronically keeping out without realizing it. You've actually been putting effort into keeping it at bay. And so that happens in retreat, happens with consistent practice, happens with inquiry. It can be disorienting at times, it can be uncomfortable, confusing, or it can just be intense. Sometimes we have the reaction to it like, oh, this isn't what I was hoping for in retreat. I was hoping for samadhi and peace and bliss and so forth. Instead, all I got was this stupid emotion or whatever. Could make a t-shirt about that. But that's just the function of openness. Or you could say presence. Sometimes I say, don't be surprised that presence can come in many forms that you don't expect. Presence isn't worried about whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable for you. This openness doesn't make those distinctions at all. This openness that is just naturally the case. And also, if you want to investigate, maybe in a somewhat deliberate way, you can notice that every part of your experience has this quality of openness. So a thought has this quality of openness if you really stop and consider it, the experience of a thought, which means slowing down and not staying on the train of thought after thought after thought, reacting to the next thought and the last thought and so forth, on and on. But just getting curious, again, slowing down. What is a thought? What is one thought right now? What is that experience like to be the thinker? What is it like to be in the space of thinking or be the space of thinking without making conclusions. There's just words to point you there, but you can become curious about that. And you find the openness there, the openness of, say, consciousness. And you can spend a whole retreat investigating that easily. And it could be rather enjoyable and profound. Yeah, this really is the first important stop, I guess. It's not a stop, but it's the first important layer, which is consciousness. There's so much to learn here, experientially learn. Maybe I could say there's so much to integrate and incorporate, but it's more of a learning of how to move very naturally within consciousness, or move very naturally as consciousness. And I think every sort of phenomenon has this quality that I'm going to refer to, but I think consciousness has it far more than any of them. And that is, the more curious you get, and the more contact close you're willing to be with it, the more experience close you're willing to be with it, the more it actually opens up and softens. Thought is very much like this. Thoughts can be absolute demons. Thoughts can make people do horrible things. I mean, through psychosis, or even through just mass delusion, and very sane people doing very bad things in groups and so forth. It's because of thoughts. It's because of beliefs. If you believe that group of people, is the worst thing that's ever happened, and, you have the means, you might want to destroy that group of people. And this has happened again and again throughout history. I was listening to a really interesting and good podcast about World War I, which I knew nothing about before this, but a lot of what caused it to happen so quickly, and for Europe to blow up into this, like, just massive, it's crazy what happened within a couple of weeks. But it was all of these assumptions that if I don't attack first, they're already going to attack me, and I know that, and they know that, and everyone was like primed for it. So it was just took the right spark at the right time to get the whole thing going. But that's just an example of, those are thoughts. That's a thought that says this person on my border, has the potential to destroy me unless I destroy them first, unless I attack first and quickly and so forth. And then the person on the other side of the border has thoughts that are kind of the opposite sort of thoughts, but they're just simple thoughts, really. It's how concretely you believe those thoughts, and how concretely you act on those thoughts, that makes all the difference. So that's just the extreme example of what thoughts can do. Believing thoughts can cause all kinds of horrors. On the other end of the spectrum, you can experience essentially the same exact thoughts and have a sort of equanimous, blissful experience. Why is that? We've all had thoughts, I hate that person, or I'm angry at that person, or, why'd they do that? Whatever. We've all had those thoughts. But why do some people turn that into massive amounts of violence, and some people are able to just notice that's a thought? No big deal. And even become curious, well, what is a thought? What is the nature of the thought itself? And start to feel that deep intimacy in consciousness. And then start noticing boundaries collapsing, and then start laughing at the fact that that thought even had me believing there's someone over there that's really the way I think they are. There really is someone over that really does have those qualities, and that, it's like, oh my God, that's not even real. That's up here. It's just thought. There's something going on out there, but it's not what the thoughts are making it out to be. And then there's such a peace in that, when you realize you don't have to manage the outside world, because it's not what you think it is. All you're managing is your own thoughts. All you're really reacting to is your own thoughts. So again, same thoughts, same exact thoughts can lead to realization, enlightenment, or they can lead to mass violence. And what's the difference? I don't know. Maybe some of it's karmic. Maybe some of it's just actually becoming curious about what's actually happening. So simple, right? What is happening? What are these voices in the mind saying? What are these voices that sound like my own voice saying that I believe about you and you and you and you, and what I need to do about it? What is that, though? What is the nature of that messenger? The thought, right? What is that like when I get really close to it? Why does it tell the story it tells? Is it actually compelling me to do anything? Who am I as the thinker of that thought? Where's that? Where's the one that's reacting to that thought? What happens when there's reactivity to those thoughts? What happens when there's no reactivity to those thoughts? You can find all this out in direct experience. It's really wonderful and super simple. It's not mystical, totally accessible for anyone. Can you imagine if like world leaders actually did this? It would change so much. It would change so much. Did it with genuine curiosity, with heart, with a willingness to see that your ideas may not be accurate. Your beliefs may just be inaccurate or false or maybe completely misleading to you as far as what the nature of reality actually is. Even the simple things that we considered obvious external objects and people and so forth, maybe even all of that isn't what it appears to be. If you have that degree of willingness to let go of your insistence in believing those thoughts are literally real, literally true, so much is possible. And again, it's just like an openness. It's just an openness to the experience of thought, which we all have. Everyone has that in some form. Everyone has thought. Many people have thousands and thousands of thoughts a day, ongoing, very identified with them. So we all have that. And it's funny, we actually don't talk about it too much. We don't talk about our thoughts outwardly too much. We just act them out in our communication styles and with our, it's so funny. It's all habituated stuff. But anyway, regardless of whether or not we talk about those thoughts, we all have them. So why not get like genuinely curious about what that is? What is that? What's going on there? What is consciousness in immediate experience? Does it have a beginning or an end? Does it have a boundary anywhere? Does a thought ever actually begin and never actually end? Can you actually mark where a thought starts and where a thought ends? If you look really, really closely, is there even a thought? Or is a thought actually something that that requires a kind of reaction, reactivity to become something real, seemingly real? To seemingly compel you to believe it, to react to it, to adjust your behavior based on it. Maybe it's actually, there's nothing there because you can't find anything. So then you become more curious about, okay, well, what's reactivity then? Something like fear. Now we're open to sensations, emotions. What is fear? What does it feel like to be in fear? This is a great place to explore that. Freak out all you want here. We're okay. We've seen it. Seen it a million times. At retreat, it happens, it's okay. So, but it's okay to feel intense emotions here. That's what we're doing here. You're in a very protected, safe environment. What does it feel like to feel the fear that you feel when you stop reacting to your own mind? It will come at some point. When you stop reacting to your mind, when you stop creating worlds that don't exist, when you stop reacting to worlds that you think do exist, at some point, there's the question arises, well, what's the point of identity then? At all. And that can lead to a kind of fear, like an existential fear. That's just one emotion. There's all kinds of emotions that can come up in this environment and that will. Grief, loss, sadness, elation, ecstasy, guilt, which really brings you to the possibility of an exploration. Again, just openness to see what's happening. Where do thoughts meet emotions? What is required for guilt to be there? There's some kind of emotional component, some sensation component. There's always a story too, right? There has to be. Probably. Can you feel guilty for nothing at all? Maybe. Try it. But you're just exploring this in direct experience. It's wonderful. It's almost like when we're in life as usual, when we're caught up, when we're whatever the opposite of this is, the retreat environment. It's like that interface is always there. The interface of thought, emotion, and reactivity. but we're looking through the interface. It's almost like we're wearing that mask of that interface. We kind of forget that we have it on. We come to retreat though, and we can actually just take it off and look at the interface itself. We can look at all the programming and see like, what is this? You know, not even judging it like, do I like it or not? Do I want to have it or not have it? It's kind of there, you know, but maybe I can just look closely at it. That's all we're doing. We're just looking closely at all the veils. We're looking closely at the mechanism of interpretation. And that's it. That's what this whole thing's about, I think, really, pretty much. You know, there are precise ways to look at certain aspects of it, but all we're really doing is just looking more closely at what's already happening. And particularly that interface, that interpretive mass of perception. And we're like stepping out of it, looking right at it, instead of looking through it and believing we see a world that we're reacting to. Now we're actually seeing like, oh, well, where's the reactivity in the filter itself? Where's the reactivity in the perceptual apparatus itself? Or is it there? And not to give the last chapter away, but I mean, as I think many of us know, the closer you look for all these things, the more things change, but you also don't find them. He's just shaking his head. He's like, it's true. You never actually find most of what you look for, but it doesn't matter. The magic is in the looking. The magic is in clear seeing. The more clearly you see, the more you start to see, yes, there is no actual physical boundaries. Yes, there is no actual perceptual distance or form anywhere, right? But don't take that on, intellectual faith or something. Like just look at what's actually happening and you'll see. And you don't need to find anything, and you don't need to analyze anything, and you don't need to learn anything in like language. Just be open. Just be open to seeing, feeling, noticing. And be open to learning what openness is. How it feels at all levels. The level of thought, as we discussed, the level of emotion, and then maybe, as we'll discuss later, at the level of direct perception. Openness at that level is a subtle thing, but it leads to very pervasive and sometimes surprising shifts in our experience.